is such an interesting phenomenon or fascination with the process of writing because it is such a creative endeavor that it's constantly challenging you to actually push beyond what you are currently doing. Hello, friends and family, and welcome back to Author Affairs, where we talk about the story behind the story. And today I'm just thinking about the actual process of writing because I've been thinking about this post that I wanted to make about where the story of Behind the Body Falls actually came from. And when I was thinking about that, I came to the realization that the very creative process of writing one story involves so much influence from external things that the act of writing itself is more than just scribbling words on a piece of paper or typing words into a computer. And I think the act of writing involves everything that you've seen, heard, or experienced throughout your entire life. And when you actually sit down to write, your brain is actually working through so much information and processing a lot of your experiences and a lot of what you've seen or heard or spoken about or read. And in doing that, it allows you to actually formulate the words that create the story that you are writing. I believe that is something so interesting because I was thinking about where Before the Body Falls actually came from. And if memory serves me well, the story itself began with the characters before the story actually came to be. The story itself began with Mandisa Tlaba, Dingane Mkhize, Sandiso Mngwangu, and all the other characters started to fit in once the story itself began to come about. So, Before the Body Falls, prior to that being the title of the book, went through a process of different names or different titles because the story hadn't yet been finalized. And the reason for that is because I actually started writing the story while I was working on Court Affairs, Lies and Allies, because I knew the characters that I wanted to have within this story. And interestingly, South Africa has had a lot of fascinating incidents, particularly within the political space, which you are able to draw inspiration from. I actually don't think enough people do that enough. But when you look at the political landscape of the country, or any country in fact, you actually start to realize that there's a lot of inspiration that you can actually pull from when you are working or developing a story. With that being said, Before the Body Falls it essentially began as a team-up story with these three characters, and then Mpho Seme joined in, Lamise McKnight joined in. But initially, it was a completely different story, which went a different direction with a different antagonist. Now, here is where things got a little bit interesting, because one of the themes that I constantly explore within my stories is the past meeting the present and how the two interact with one another. And because this is a team-up story where you have Mandisa Tlaba and Dingane Mkhize dominating most of the story, there had to be moments of their past that appear within the present day story and therefore affect the outcome of what the story actually becomes. And it gets slightly tricky and a bit challenging with the more characters you add. However, that challenge is actually where the beauty of the story comes in. Because the more you work on a story, the more you develop it, the more you get to understand human psychology. When I actually finally hit that sweet spot and had that final aha moment for Before the Body Falls, and I knew that this is the actual story, and I understood the direction that the story itself wanted to go beyond what I thought I wanted it to be. That is when the story truly came alive. And I believe that is constantly and always the point when a story comes alive, when it becomes more than just an amalgamation of your ideas, but it becomes a sort of living essence of its own, and it dictates its own direction. I actually wonder, there are considered two types of writers, plotters and pantsers, and I actually wonder if it's the same for each of those type of writers. If you also have this, let's not call it an issue, but this interesting phenomenon perhaps, or paradox, that your characters actually end up controlling the story rather than what you had planned working out in the story. I'd like to find out more about that. So write that down in the comment section so that we can actually begin that conversation and have a chat around that. And I believe that some stories, they begin with a question, others begin with a statement, others begin with a character, other stories may even begin with a simple object. And they then begin to develop and evolve beyond that one thing, and they become something truly real. And I think when the story begins to influence reality and reality influence the story, I think there's a certain beauty in that. I didn't actually plan this episode, so that's why we didn't do the video recording this time. But from wherever you are tuning in from, thank you for having a listen. So until next time, keep creating, keep dreaming, and keep writing. Stay blessed.